It's sometimes hard to believe that someone like Kim Jung-gi could have even existed. I mean, how many people are walking around that can make drawings at this level of scale and detail without needing any preparation sketches, without making any errors at all, and doing it entirely from imagination? Let's try to understand Kim Jung-gi and see if we can figure out just how in the hell a guy who wasn't even allowed to take art classes as a kid achieved this level of generational prowess. So when he was in kindergarten, at around about 6 years old, Kim Jung-gi got his first ever sketchbook, and on its cover was an illustration of Dr. Slump, a manga series by Akira Toriyama, the guy who did Dragon Ball. And there's just something about this illustration that stuck with him, because from then on, Kim Jung-gi was hooked. He started drawing all the time, all day, all night, in school, at home, on anything he could get his hands on. He wanted nothing more than to be able to draw in the same kind of style as Dr. Slump. Problem was, though, that his parents weren't the biggest fans of their son's newfound obsession, because as the eldest child, they had certain expectations of Kim Jung-gi, and as we all know, art kinda pays zero. So his parents didn't want to encourage this weird drawing thing. They even went as far as preventing him from taking art classes. Because of this lack of formal training, he didn't know a lot of in-depth art theory or anything like that. He relied majorly on his observation of the world around him. But perhaps this was all he needed, because funnily enough, it was through mere observation that Kim Jung-gi taught himself the concept of perspective.
I watched and drew. When I was younger, private perspective drawing classes didn't exist at all. But when I look back at my drawings from kindergarten, I used a 1-point or 2-point perspective drawing technique for drawing dimensional objects. Obviously, I had no idea which technique I was using at that point, but I sort of taught myself to be good at it by getting into a habit of observing things around me.
Now, teaching yourself 1 or 2-point perspective was already impressive on its own, but what's even more insane is that he did the same thing with fisheye or 5-point perspective as well.
Fisheye structure is a structure that was created out of my ego. That is, ego to include as much as possible on a single scene. Let's say I'm at a coffee shop. If I were to draw the coffee shop, I can draw the left, middle, and right side. But through this structure, I simply wanted to squeeze everything into one frame. So I looked at this side and drew this side and then this side, and it naturally turned into this fisheye structure.
Teaching yourself fisheye perspective is genuinely insane. So eventually, as Kim Jung-gi was going into high school, his parents at this point kind of gave in and accepted that their son was going to be an artist no matter what. So they began to let him take art classes, and it's towards the end of his time in high school that we get this comic strip. This is the earliest drawing that we have of Kim Jung-gi. He did this when he was 17. Pretty insane, especially for a teenager who was mostly self-taught at this point. Now, Kim Jung-gi's brain operated on an entirely different level, and perhaps the best example of this is his time in the military. So in South Korea, men above the age of 18 are required to participate in mandatory military service, which presented a bit of a problem for Kim Jung-gi because it meant that he wouldn't be able to draw for the next year or so. Well, I mean, he could draw, but he decided not to, because in the Korean military, apparently, if your superiors find out that you're an artist, they're going to ask you to draw stuff and to draw them and to draw their families. And who's trying to do all that, bro? So Kim Jung-gi decided to hide his art skills. But we're talking about a guy who's been obsessed with drawing since he was a kid. So since he couldn't physically draw, he just did the next best thing. Because being in the military exposed him to these entirely new environments that he wasn't familiar with. So what he'd do is he would visually absorb all these new surroundings, all these equipment and the outfits and the weaponry and all this stuff, and he would draw it in his head. That's kind of what he did in the military. He drew in his head, which might sound kind of wild, but mental training like this is actually surprisingly effective. And so despite the fact that he wasn't drawing for like a year or so, he was still getting better. He was still improving and sharpening his artistic eye. It's kind of cool because slowly but surely, even though he probably wasn't aware of it at the time, all the puzzle pieces were falling perfectly into place. In 2011, Kim Jung-gi was invited to Bucheon International Comic Festival. Now, he had a bit of a reputation at this point, and so instead of simply exhibiting his artwork in the way that artists in these kinds of festivals typically do, he was asked to do something different, which was to draw live, right then and there, and display his skills in real time to the audience. He'd done this kind of thing before. He'd done a bit of teaching at this point, and he would sometimes draw live in front of his students to maybe demonstrate certain concepts, but this would be his first time doing it in public in front of a larger audience. So he agreed to the idea, and as you might expect, it blew the audience away because it's not every day that you come across a dude who can draw at this level as if it was child's play. Now, the significance of this moment for Kim's career really can't be overstated because it's what got him into doing more and more of these live drawing sessions. Some of these ended up getting uploaded to YouTube, and they went absolutely ballistic, garnering hundreds of thousands, millions of views. This is the first time so many people across the world are getting exposed to Kim Jung-gi's work, and it was crazy. Like, bro, who the hell is this guy? How the hell is he so good at drawing? I mean, just give him a wall in a few hours and he's gonna give you this intricate, detailed, and chaotic scenes without making any mistakes, without needing any prior sketches. Bro, this shouldn't even be possible. This comment right here put it perfectly. It's like he's tracing an image that we can't see. And so this makes you wonder, when he puts his pen to paper and begins creating all these insane drawings from his memory, what's exactly going through his mind? What does he see that nobody else does?
It might look like I'm just doodling right now, but in my head, things are going crazy. First, once I decide to draw, I think about what. And then I create another me in my mind. Another me, aka mini-me, will be traveling through the space of what I want to draw. Let's take this situation for example. Now, I send a bunch of my mini-me's all over the space to find the best suited location for me to draw. Which perspective should I use? Where is the coolest angle or composition with the most impact? Will I be seeing in Nippleman's perspective? Or should I see in Perverted Pokemon's perspective? What kind of situation is it? What kind of things are around me? I think about what kind of buildings, vehicles, people, animals, plants would fit this situation. After organizing it in my mind, I have to materialize it. But this is not as easy as it sounds. I have to recall all of my background knowledge. The box that you're seeing right now, that's the first image that I float in my head when I try to draw different characters in different perspectives.
So Kim Jung-gi places this massive significance on really immersing yourself into the scene that you want to draw. You know, even going as far as imagining yourself walking through it. At least that's how he does it, which is cool and all. But how do you even get into a position to draw the thing that he's visualizing in his head? Because yeah, sure, he drew a lot as a kid, but surely that alone doesn't explain the level of insanity that we're witnessing. So how does he do it? Well, to understand it, we're going to need to take a look at the neuroscientific side of things. So it's going to get a little bit technical, but it's going to make sense in the end, okay? So how do our brains learn things? So let's say hypothetically, for the sake of argument, that you have a brain, okay? Anything you do, any movement you make, any thought you think, any skill that you have is all as a result of neurons in your brain firing in very specific pathways. Say for example, you sit down to draw a hand. Your brain goes, oh, we need to draw a hand. Okay, let's go to the hand drawing neural pathways and let's start activating them. And when that happens, bam, you actually start to draw the hand. And so if you're good at drawing hands, it means that your hand drawing neural pathways are like strong and robust, kind of like a really strong rope. If you're unfortunate at drawing hands, somewhat like a weak rope, it means that your neural pathways are, well, kind of weak. And so if you want to get better at drawing hands, for example, it's going to come as a result of strengthening those neural pathways. Does that make sense? So how is this achieved? Well, it's quite simple actually. It's by using these neural pathways repetitively. By using them over and over and over again, they're going to slowly but surely get stronger. And if you keep doing this, they might even eventually reach a point where the pathways are so strong that, you know, the drawing that you're trying to make, no matter how complex it is, becomes easy to you. It becomes second nature. That makes sense? And so now for Kim Jung-gi, in his earlier years, as we discussed, he was drawing a lot, sure, which is perfect for neural pathways strengthening, right? But the real kind of meat here is that he wasn't just strengthening his drawing neural pathways, because when you're drawing, what are you doing? Maybe you're observing a reference, or maybe you're trying to draw from imagination, so you're trying to translate an image in your brain onto the paper that you're drawing on or something. And for that paper, you know, it's a 2D surface and you're trying to imagine it and you're trying to visualize it as a 3D space and you're trying to rotate all these objects within this imaginary 3D space. You know, there's a lot of kind of cognitive things your brain is doing as you're drawing. And for Kim Jung-gi, due to the sheer amount of time that he spent drawing, and not only that, but with how meticulous he was with it, he was strengthening his neural pathways for all these different cognitive functions that accompany drawing, you know, his neural pathways for observation, for visualization, for all these stuff, strengthening all these neural pathways to such an insane degree that he reached a point where he could draw pretty much anything he wanted effortlessly.
So it was the third year of college. I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so I was just drawing at home. It was raging drawing. Like, I've got nothing else to do, nowhere to go, I'll just draw. I don't remember exactly what I was drawing, but then I had a realization. Hey, I don't think I'll have any problems drawing any form in perspective from now on. If someone was like, hey, Jung-gi, draw this or draw that, I don't have any problems visualizing the form anymore.
But at the end of the day, Kim Jung-gi was just a guy. He was just an artist who, despite how good he was, he still experienced common artist struggles.
아, 그렇잖아요. 정말 지금도 인스타를 보면은 와, 이거 왜 이렇게 그리지? 왜 이렇게 잘 그리지? 이런 사람들이 너무 많아가지고 재밌습니다. 하여튼 하루에도 몇 번씩 이게 잘 그려지고 있나, 내게 맞나 이걸 계속 반문하고 다시 또 마음속으로 난 잘하고 있어라고 다시 또 다독이고 이런 과정이 계속 반복이에요.
Now, all this talk about how good Kim Jung-gi got by observing and drawing and neural pathways and all that stuff, it's cool and all, but considering the fact that most of you are adults, or at least kind of adults with responsibility, it's probably not the easiest thing to like draw for 30 hours a day for the next 25 years of your life or whatever. But you don't have to try and copy Kim Jung-gi one for one. For example, for me, since kind of learning about him when I'm in the gym, I try to like look at observe people for artistic purposes, trying to see, God, that sounds so weird, but just trying to see how like someone's interacting with certain equipment and taking note of like how their arms are positioned and how their bodies are positioned so I can get home. That sounds so weird, but you get the point, right? Trying to like take note of it so I get back home later that day and draw it. So by trying to draw from memory and from observation more often, trying to like strengthen those neural pathways. Kim Jung-gi, bro, W human.
나이가 들면 들수록 그렇게 드는 생각인데 어릴 때는 그림을 잘 그려야 된다라고 생각했었고 그런 욕심도 되게 많았었고 그런데 이제 나이가 좀 들거나 하다 보니까는 그런 것들이 좀 무뎌지기도 하고 또 이렇게도 잘 그린 것 같고 저렇게도 잘 그린 것 같아요. 다 잘 그리는 것 같아요. 진짜로.